Welcome back everyone to the ReactJS series. So it's session number 2. In this session we'll be learning about how to set up the environment, how to work with the components, specifically classes and functions, and how to work with the properties. So let's jump to the setting up of the environment. So for environment setup, you need to go to the nodejs.org. You need to download the Node.js. So at the time of recording, the current version is 12.17. Any version which is greater than 10x would be fine for this development. And then you can go to the GitHub where you can find out the Facebook create React app package. So in this you will find the details about how to create a React app, and you can see in the quick overview there's a npx command which you would be running to create your this React application, and post that you can just start the npm which will open your site or open your application under the local host. And the third thing, as an ID you would be required to have Visual Code installed. So you can go to the code.visualstudio.com and then download your Visual Code for Windows or any other machine if you're using machine separate than Windows. So let's jump to the starting of this React app creation. So you need to go to the command prompt, type cmd. Okay, so now I'm creating one directory, that is ReactJS learning, and I'll just move under this directory. Going forward, all the solution, all the code will reside under this directory only. So now I got my directory created. Now I can go to the npx create React app. So you can name your application, let's say hello world. What can be best than this? So I'm just running that out. So you must have seen that I'm running npx, not npm. And why is that so? Because npx is a package runner. Does not require to install the packages before running the create React app command. So if we do with the npm, then initially we have to install the React app packages, then we can run this React app command. So it's a shortcut way of doing it. So it may take a while, so I'm just pausing it. I have my project name with all small letters because capital letters are not allowed in the name, package names, application name. So I'm just running it. It may take a while, so I'm just going to pause my video for a while. So now we got our solution created. So now you can open the Visual Studio Code, and you can just open the folder and can go inside the directory which we just created under users and ReactJS learning. I can open this my React app. Okay, so now you can see my React app solution gets opened in this Visual Code, and there are majorly 3 folders. One is node modules. It install all the dependencies under node modules. There is one public folder, so that public folder is having index.html. So this is the actual root HTML which will be rendered. So you can see there is one div having ID root, which in turn is being used under the index.js. So I'll be showing that in a while. So, and majorly all the logo and the default images gets over here. So src, the source folder, is the major folder which will contain all the code files. So you can see app.css, app.js. App.js is the component file which is being used under the index.js. So if I just open the index.js, you can see React DOM.render. It's using the div which is having the ID root, and the component app is being used. And how that is being used, before using that we have to import that component. So we'll just talk in detail for how import and how we can have our custom components integrated there. And if I go below, then I find a service worker.js. So it's being used to build out the progressive applications. So we'll talk about this in detail in the later sections. And we can directly come to the package.json. So you can see there these package.json is having all the packages which are installed and which are actually a dependency for this solution to work. So React, React DOM, React scripts, so all these comes besides this. So as I said, I will be working under the source folder, and for this session I'll be covering the components. So I'll just going to create one folder named as components, and components nothing would be just the JS files which would be actually in turn being used under the app.js or index.js directly. So for this demo, for this specific application, I'll be just juggling up with a sample JS file, and will just show you how that JS can be included as an application app component under the app.js and index.js. So let's start with one JS. Let's name that as sample JS. So I just added one JS file. Now if we would like to build any component for React, then we have to import the React from React. So this should be our first line, and under this I'll be writing component because I'm going to extend the components. And after that, the first example is of class components. So for this class component, I'll be typing class and class name, let's say sample, or let's say sample, and which will extend the component. So this is our class, and as to use this class we have to export it out, otherwise we would not able to include this class under any of our JSs or any of our other classes. So for that we have to use the export default and the class name. So this is one way of doing it. So under this I'll be using render method. So this render method is being implemented by this React component. We would not be calling this render method explicitly anywhere. So it will be automatically get calls whenever we are using the components, the sample component in any of other classes. So I'll just write what render method should be returning. So it should be returning, let's say, div, and that div showing one heading. It's a class component. So that's how you can write your first class, and we are exporting it as sample over here. So now how to get it rendered? So first of all, you can use this terminal which is integrated there. You can just click on new terminal. So instead of running the subsequent commands from command prompt, we can run directly from here. So let's run it out first of all. npm start. So my already this port is being used, so I'll say yes, run in on a different one. Okay. So we got our application run over here. So by default, either it will run on 3000 or 3001 if 3000 being used. So my port was, it was showing that my port was being used, so that's why it chose a different port. So that's not a problem. Leave it that as is. So now I'll just move to the app.js. So in app.js you can see there are a lot many things which are there. Image source logo, which is why this image logo is coming. So we can just make it a bit clean up so that I can show you how our component gets rendered. I'll just remove the entire stuff. Okay, so now I have this component. Now I'll be using my sample class to be called from this app.js. For that I'll be importing my class, and you can, as I exported with sample name, so you can import it with the same name, dot component slash sample. So this is how I can import my class. Now how I can use it. So if you hover it class on the import sample, it's saying sample is declared, but its value is never read. So that means it's never used. So I'll just go to the return statement. and under this I'll just include my sample component and just save it. So now you can see I'm getting some error. What's saying is invalid expected string but got object. Save that out, and if I went to my this browser, I see class component. So that's mean that my sample component is being called. So you can see it's returning the class component. Okay, so we are good. We are able to use our a new class component under the app.js, under the existing components. Okay, so why this export default is required? So whenever if we write our file, let me comment that out. If write my file, and if I want to use my class under app.js, then I would not able to use it out, because this class would not be exported out. If I would like to use it, I have to have exported. So there are a couple of ways of doing that. One is you can just do export default sample, or you can just, instead of writing it explicitly, you can just do a export default class sample within the same. So if I go back, it's not giving any error. It has started taking that, so that means we are good. So one way of doing it this way. And how this is different from this is that we need not to specifically use sample in the class where we want to use it. So let's say I'm saying it's a demo. Rather than like using the class name, I can just simply say demo, and if I save it, if I go to the screen, it's still seeing the giving the same thing. So it's not resulting into any error. So I can use any name, any component name, if I use export default class in front of my class, rather than like writing explicitly with some specific name. So these are the two way we can export that out. And there is one other way. If I just remove the default one and save it, it will give me compile error. Why? Because under the app.js, this class is not being able to identify it. So to make that work, I have to use my class name with a parenthesis, with the curly braces, and have to use the same class name for this sample. So now I'm saving it. It does not give any error and started working well again. So these are three ways to use the class component. We just learned about how to use the class component, how it can be used from a different class as well. So now let's move to the function component. So I'll just create a sample function JS where I'll be using the function. So again, the step would be same. I have to include the React. I have to include the component, and the components. Now I can have my function, let's say sample function, and the same way I can just use the return. So it will return the expected div. So again, for function as well, I need to export that out. Export default and sample function. So this is how we can use the function. And again, for using this function, so let me go to the app.js again, and I will include this function, which is sample function from, again, the same components / sample function. And if I just type that under, let's say, header 3, so that we have a better distinguishing. Sample function, and if I just save that out and go to my screen, so I'm not seeing anything. And why? because this my sample exported function name is different, and I have specifically used that as an export default statement. And if I go to my app.js, so it's having the small case sample function, so that we should be aware that it's a header coming from a sample function. So if I just go to the browser, then I can see header from sample function. So in app.js, we just use the class component and the function component. So let's circle back to the functions. So there are different way of writing functions. So I can have this in this format, and I can have using that arrow as a lambda expression as well. So let's use that out as well. I'm just commenting that out, and let's say constant sample function, as an arrow, and I'm writing the same render method inside this one, and I'll just saved it. So it is still showing that one, so that means it's working well. So using this lambda expression or arrow as well, you can write your functions. So there could be like a different syntax and different ways of writing functions as well. So we just learned about classes component and the function component. So let's quickly talk about the properties, how you can pass the property. So I've just opened the app.js. So let's say this sample class component, I would like to pass the property, let's say name of the class. So you can just simply pass my React class, and in the sample JS, which is my class component, so I can just use let's say my property this dot props dot name. So it will allow me to fetch the properties and which are being passed or being passed with that class. So I just save that out, and let's go. So my class my class component equal to my rect class. So that's how we can read out the properties from my class component and get that displayed. So this is how we can pass properties. And in functions, how we can pass in function, we have to the this or the parenthesis this is not a valid syntax in functions. So for that we have to pass the props as in parameters, and under the props we can read out. If you would like to pass the property, then in this way you can read that out. So I need to take that I need to use the parenthesis so that it can be treated as the property. So I'll just pass my app.js with the name. So this is for function. So if I just save it, and if I go to the browser, you can see I'm getting a property, the property for my class component, and I'm also getting a property for my function component. So till now we understood about classes component and the function component, how to pass the properties inside class and how to pass the properties inside of function. So for this session 2, I believe like this enough for you to grasp, to learn and try your own hands-on on creating the sample app. Talk to you in session 3 with a detailed programming stuff. Thank you.